Welcome to our weekly Mitzvah Shabbos program. This is the second program, a continuation from last week. Leilu Nishmas, Maizede, the Malamed of the Rebbe, Shnei Zalman, Ben Levi Yitzchok. We're in the middle of sharing some stories of the Rebbe, his younger years, Maizede and Reb Leivik. Stories that I heard from Maizede, or I heard from other people that heard from Maizede. So the Neshama is Al-Hotman Aliyah, V'kitzu v'rananu, Sheikh Ni'ofor, V'hu b'seicham, B'korev Mamish. We left off last week about the Yechides that Reb Leivik had with the Rebbe Rashab. And today I want to continue. Once the council of Yekaterinoslav decided to build a park over the Jewish cemetery in Yekaterinoslav, and Reb Leivik had the task of supervising the reburial of two Rabbonim that were in Yekaterinoslav before Reb Leivik. So when the diggers came to the kever of the previous Rav, his name was Rebbe Wolf Kozavinkov. So somehow the diggers, they knocked on the covering there of the body of the nifter of Rebbe Wolf, the Rav, the previous Rav. People were standing around, Chassidim. People were shocked. This was 20 years after the passing of Rebbe Wolf, of the Rav of Harav Kozavinkov. 20 years. And they looked at him, his face looked exactly the same as they buried him 20 years ago. It's an unbelievable. So Maizede said, when Reb Leivik told him this story, Reb Leivik told this to Maizede, his face, Reb Leivik's face covered with tears. When he was telling him, his face was covered with tears. Maizede often went to Reb Leivik's house. He was the Rav, often. And he said he always speaking Kabbalah. Everything he saw was a Kabbalah. Let's say he saw a table. He started to think about a table, so he started to speak Kabbalah. Or he started to speak about a chair, or about a house in Kabbalah. Everything Kabbalah. That's what Maizede told me. Now I want to share with you one more thing. It's very, very interesting. One time, Maizede's family, they baked matzah. They baked matzah, but they were poor. The poverty, they were so poor that they usually maim shalonu, water that used for the matzahs, that's overnight. Let's say you give maim shalonu, so you do it with a glass. You maim shalonu, that water is remained overnight. Next morning, you bake the matzah with that water. But since Maizede was very poor, and he didn't have a glass, but he had a metal container, a Barzel. I'm saying the word Barzel, you'll know why. Barzel means metal. He had a metal container. So he didn't know what to do. Can he use metal instead of glass? So he sent his 7-year-old son, my uncle, He was then Sholem. He was a big mashpia later. To Rabbi Leivik to ask him a shaila whether you can use metal, Barzel, for Maim Shalom. So Rabbi Leivik answered to this boy, to my uncle, Apikabola. Better not. Apikabola. I don't know if that's halacha, but Apikabola better not. Tell your father, Rabbi Leivik said, Barzel in Hebrew is a Rosh Tevis for the four mothers. Beis is Bilha, that's the maid of Rachel. Reish is Rachel. Zayin is Zilpah, the maid of Leah, and Lamed is Leah. In such combination, they were made servants, are placed before the Imais. Leah and Rachel were the Imais. Bilha and Zilpah are not called Imais. So since they were placed before, the essence of arrogance is the extreme opposite of baking matzah, which matzah represents humility. Matzah is humility. It's flat. Chometz is gaiva, arrogance. And since the Imais were before, that shows for arrogance. And now you're going to bake matzah, which matzah is humility. So it's better not to use Barzel. That's what he told. Tell your father. Interesting word. Now going back to my Zayde, Rabbi Leivik. Rabbi Leivik was so close to my Zayde. He liked my Zayde. He was a Yerushalayim. He was a Lamdin. Midas Tevis, he had a good heart. And he was very emes. Whenever my Zayda heard the word Absalosh Nore, he couldn't take it. I mean, there's a lot of stories about that, but I'm not going to go into it. He was a Ish emes. My Zayda always chazert Mishnayis Balpeh. He knew that always, whenever he had an extra minute, he went somewhere, always Mishnayis Balpeh. My Zayda often said that after 120 years, after the tahara of the body, and they put the body on he called it on a brettel, on a board, before the kvura, it takes time. So what does a body do between the tahara and the kvura? He chazes mishnayis balpeh. And it says in Tanya about the important mishnayis balpeh, take away from Chibur HaKever. Anyways, so this is what my Zayda always said. And by the way, speaking about tahara, Ravush Falol of Hasholim, I remember, he was the head of Chevre Kadisha. He made taharas. After he made my Zayda's tahara, he told us that the face of my Zayda silikt al lebedi kerid. Mizet, you can see on the face, silikt al lebedi kerid. Now we understand why Rabbi Leivik B'davke wanted my Zayda to be a Malamed for the Rebbe. Anyways, let's go further. The biggest simcha my Zayda had was when the Rebbe became a chosn to Chaya Mushke. And he clipped Masach Nachas. Now, let me tell you, before the Chaya Mushke, before the Rebbe became a chosn, let me tell you, maybe I told you, I hear from other people a different girsa. I don't know if it's true or not, but I just want to say what I heard from Reb Chaim Lieberman. He was in Eshel here in the last years, and what Reb Chaim Lieberman, who was the maskir of the Frierdiker Rebbe, said. That's all I can say. The other things that they said about that, I don't know if it's true, but I just heard from him. Reb Chaim Lieberman said the Rebbe Tzachane came to the Frierdiker Rebbe to speak about a shidduch for his son, mit geretem shidduch, for the Rebbe to Chai Mushke, and to speak it over. So she said to the Frierdiker Rebbe, I want not dowry. Those days they gave dowry, especially a chosten like the Rebbe, a special chosten. Ich habe a guten Bacher, I have a good Bacher, and I want dowry. So the Frierdiker Rebbe said to her, I would be glad to give you, but I don't have money. But the Frierdiker Rebbe, we all know, we spoke about it many times in our previous programs. The Orimkeit, he didn't have, he doesn't have. So waiting. That's I heard from Chaim Lieberman. Then the Frierdiker Rebbe says, Ich hab doch ältere Kinder. The Rebbe had an older daughter. It'll be jealous. There'll be jealousy. So how can I? How can I promise? They're both waiting. Then the Frierdiker Rebbe, then the Rebbe Tzachane said, Aber gib, but give. That's all. That's the way I heard. But give. I guess this means give Rabbistva. That's what it means. Aber gib. So the Frierdiker Rebbe was waiting, and he smiled. He says, "Nu, the Chassidim will schon voneinander kleiden. The Chassidim will already, they'll decide what to do." And that's what happened. This is exactly what I heard from Chaim Lieberman, and the rest, what people, how else, I don't know. Now this reminds me, when the Frierdiker Rebbe told Reb Chaim Lieberman, don't hang around, very edel. There was when the Frierdiker Rebbe was upstairs in 770, by a meal, I don't know which meal, Bachim were pushing to see if Frierdiker Rebbe, there was a little commotion. So the Frierdiker Rebbe heard a lot of commotion. So he turns around to the Bachim and he says, Afil zu Malachim sagt man Seischem l'sholem. Even to Malachim you say Seischem l'sholem. Friday night you say Seischem l'sholem. In other words, he didn't tell them to leave, but even them he said Seischem l'sholem. So they all left. Anyways, so the Rebbe's Chassaneh was in Poland. I heard from Isaiah in Warsaw. The Rebbe's parents were not at the wedding. Not Rebbe Tzidchane and not Rebbe Leivik. So my Zayda said, since Rebbe Leivik couldn't come to the wedding, so Rebbe Leivik wrote an exactly 101 word telegram to his son, to the Rebbe, for his wedding. 101 words. He also noted that the tablecloth on which Rebbe Leivik wrote the letter was soaked in tears. A 101 words he wrote. Rebbe Leivik's neighbors were against religion. The guy was a neighbor mamish. He was an engineer, and he distanced himself from. The Rebbe's father had a problem. Even sometimes when they bring the Rebbe's house, he made trouble. He disturbed. Yet he was very moved, this engineer, by the outpouring of emotion on the occasion of the day of the Rebbe's wedding. He decided even to help the Rav, to help Rebbe Leivik. The entire Jewish community turned to participate and gave presents to Rebbe Leivik, came to Rebbe Leivik's house and Rebbe Tzachane on the night of the wedding. There was a big gathering. It was an atmosphere of simcha. My Zayda was there with the family by Rebbe Leivik the night of the Chassanah. It was a big simcha. Reb Leivik said a mimer at that night. And later people found out that the moment that Reb Leivik said a mimer in Russia, the Frierdiker Rebbe said a mimer at the Chasane, at the same moment in Poland. In the middle of dancing, my Zayde got up on the table, he jumped on the table, and his shirt was dripping from sweat. And he said, I have the privilege, the great privilege, that my former student is becoming the son-in-law of the king, son-in-law of the Rebbe. So he was privileged to be his Melamed. In Mitzvah Hashem, next week we'll continue the third part of the program. Thank you.